Cyndi, what is the nicest thing a non-family member has ever done for you?
I have to go back to age 12 when a non-family member sent me back to life. And let me tell you what I mean by that. This is a bit of a supernatural story. And I don't know if one would call the voice, the divine, the source a non-family member, because at some level, we're all interconnected in our souls. But I reached about age 12, 13, and I was one of those really intuitive, really psychic kids. I could see spirits, I could talk to them, I could see colors coming off of people, but I was also really depressed by the time I got to puberty. My family was an unhappy family. My mother was really fed up with the marriage. They both drank a lot, and everything was just heavy. It was hard. It was heavy. I didn't like school. I felt odd. I felt unusual. I was depressed. And a white Wonder Bread Norwegian family doesn't use words like depression or anxiety or even talk about anything but what the meatloaf and the potatoes look like at dinner. Everything was just, it was just strained and stretched. And so I decided that I wanted to die. I decided I was done. I decided I was going to leave. And so I told my parents, I'm going to die. And they looked at me like they did with many of the phrases that I would utter. And they said, you know, whatever. And kind of between themselves said, isn't she imaginative? And I woke up the next morning really, really ill. I had the flu. I had a fever. I was very sick. And over the next 2 to 3 days, I was confined to my bed. And I literally looked like a skeleton by the end of those 2 or 3 days. And my parents were very, very worried. My uncle, through my dad's side of the family, was a surgeon. And sometimes he would make house calls because he was my uncle. So he would come and figure out what was wrong. Once he even made a house call on our white rat that had cancer. And I was obviously more valuable than our white rat. And he sent that to heaven. So when they said, can Uncle Mike come and see you? I said, sure, thinking that'll hurry up my journey here. Well, he came over and he was very concerned. And he said, if she doesn't get better tomorrow, we're going to put her in the hospital because she's dehydrated and we'll have to put her on IVs and run antibiotics and whatever. And he left, and inside of myself, all I could think of is, well, then I'm going to go sooner. I'm leaving tonight. And, you know, I look back at it and what I would think if I had one of my two boys saying this to me, and I feel just sad. I feel sad for what my life was back then. And I have to say, I also, when I look back, feel a little proud that I was so determined, so very stubborn, and so very Norwegian, as Norwegians would point out about themselves. So that night, I just willed myself to leave. And I did. I lifted out of my body. And to this day, I can recall what that was like. It's like a separation. And I could almost hear this sort of tug, this almost like, it's like a belt starting to snap. And I'm up near the ceiling looking down, and I saw my form. And my thought was, oh, she's so young. She's so little. She's so skinny. She looks so sad. And one picture that stays in my mind even today is I could see the orange juice next to my bed. And in my generation, when you were sick, you got dry toast, which is horrible, chicken noodle soup, which I never liked, and orange juice, which I still don't like to this day, mainly because I could see the orange juice and I could see the Lysol beads on the orange juice, because back then, as these days again, you kept away the germs from the family by just spraying the sick person's room with Lysol over and over and over again. And I thought, oh, what a horrible thing to make her drink. And then I felt free and I started drifting up. It's hard for me to really explain what it was like to be up there. I don't really have pictures. It's more of a sense. It's more of a sense of darkness with the promise of light. And I could feel, I couldn't see the light. I couldn't see what everybody talks about with near-death experiences. I just knew I was going someplace warm and someplace sort of comfortable and maybe known. And I was getting further and further away from Earth, and I heard this voice. Here's the kindest thing that was done for me, but I was very angry about it. This voice that said, "You have to go back." And I said, no. I don't know how I talked, but I said, no, I'm not going back. And I kept drifting, and I'm going back into this sort of, I escaped. And the voice said again, no, you have to go back. And I said, no. And it was 3 times. The 3rd time, I'm leaving and I'm going, oh, I'm getting away with this. And the voice said, you are going back. To which I asked, why? And the voice said, you haven't done anything yet. And before I could even think about that comment, because I felt like I'd done quite a bit by age 12, 13, I was forced back into the body. I was in the body. I was looking up and out. I felt sick to my stomach, but I also knew the sickness was gone. The sickness in the body was gone. And I was really mad. Who said I had to come back? Who says I haven't done anything? And it's at that point that I actually shut down my intuitive gifts. I said, well, then I'm not going to talk to you or anybody like you. And I didn't use the word God in my head. It was the voice. And I just put all the voices, all the spirits, all the beings of any other dimension into one basket and just tossed it away and said, okay, I'm just going to be normal. I'm not going to do anything then. I'm just going to be a normal person. And throughout my teens, I was a normal person, meaning I was very unhealthy. I developed anorexia and bulimia and binge purge and codependency. I already had codependency, but whatever. And compulsive this and compulsive that. And it's interesting that all of that rose when I shut my soul down to the connections that I had already had. And I didn't really let those gifts open up again until I went to therapy when I was about 19 or 20. And I was very hesitant to tell anything to the therapist about myself. I just let her define me and tell me what was wrong with me. And I told her a few stories about myself. And then she one day looked at me and she said, you know, you don't only have all these therapeutic conditions, you also are psychic, but you shut it down. And I thought, wow, there's a label. And I started opening up a little bit. I started hearing things again at night. I started sensing, I started feeling, I started very slowly. It was a very slow thaw coming back into what I would call my soul, or letting my soul really begin to inch back through and inhabit my body. I spent my 20s traveling, my 30s also learning and studying, but that's not really the story. In a way, I'm backing myself into a corner where I have to thank 2 non-family members for what they did. I have to thank the voice, because what if I had left? What if I was allowed to have a near-death experience? What if I hadn't flunked the near-death experience? I would not be here. I wouldn't have had my children. I wouldn't have met so many wonderful friends and people and have had life experiences, high and low and in between. I wouldn't be enjoying my business. I wouldn't have written. I wouldn't have new goals in my life, even at the age that I'm at. So sometimes we have to thank people, beings, whatever they might be, for something that made us very unhappy, and actually maybe even created a remedial pattern in our life, because I went in reverse, not forward. But I also think I have to thank the therapist, because think about it. If she hadn't had the presence of mind to know a word like psychic, if she hadn't had the sense of her own intuition so she could read into me, I probably wouldn't have opened up. I probably wouldn't have really become the person I am. Good, bad, medium, big, small, all of it. So I thank both the voice and that therapist, and this opportunity also to share with all of you that supernatural, but also very, very natural experience of dealing with feelings in a way that I went backward, but only to go forward again. So thank you.